My name is Obed, and I'll be moderating the discussion today, where we sort of aim to highlight what have been some of the hidden cost and externality cost of not just perhaps. What we have been looking into is what we're sort of trying to explore is what is the external or the hidden cost of even any of the energy sources that can actually be used for power generation. Our case study is pretty much focused on coal, but it's mainly just to sort of get a good understanding of what these different external costs are. We have actually, many of you have been a part of a previous consultation where we are doing some of the closed door discussions, some of the open sessions where we're sort of trying to analyze what are some of the key contours of this change, where we sort of were trying to gather some of the inputs from the stakeholders. Based on that, SDPI actually has developed a research study that will shortly be presenting today. But again, before going into any discussion, let me set some of the housekeeping rules and introduce you some of the speakers that we have for today. So the session is being recorded and the video will be posted online. The event is also going live on different social media platforms of SDPI, including its YouTube, LinkedIn, and as well as X now. Now the session is being conducted in a hybrid manner, and thank you so much for those definitely who are in person. We fully understand that even in the morning we were sort of trying to shift it to a completely online mode given the geopolitical challenges that we were facing. But thank you so much. So we sort of decided to go into a more of a hybrid manner. So we have both individuals, speakers, as well as general audience, as well as experts joining us online, as well as in person. And as for the speakers, we'll request them to turn on their cameras while they're speaking, as long as the network allows them to do so without any of the disruptions. For any question, you can sort of either write it down in the chat or the Q&A box, or for the online participant, you can also sort of click on the raise hand tab, and then we'll be sort of taking your interventions as well. So, the agenda is sort of structured is that after the initial presentation from Zainab Babar, we are very pleased to have been joined by Sir Mohammad Ayub Saab. He's the former MD of NTDC as well as the former CEO of KPK Transmission Company. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. We also have Kurat Olen, the policy analyst at PPMC, Power Planning and Monitoring Company, with us. Thank you so much, Kurat, for joining us. Once again, always a pleasure of having Badr Alam Saab with us. He is currently the CEO of Policy Research Institute for Equitable Development, Pride. We have Zubair Saab here with us from Indus Consortium that represents one of the very leading community-driven organization. And thank you. We also have one of our international colleagues, Ms. Helen. She is a senior research associate at Center for Policy Dialogue, CPT, Bangladesh, who will sort of be presenting us some of the key interventions that are happening from an international perspective as well. And definitely, last but not the least, we're very pleased to have with us Shakib Ilahi Saab. Shakib Saab is actually one of the very key individuals working in the climate space, but at the same time is also senior advisor at the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Before going to the discussion, let me sort of try to set a bit of an agenda of what we're sort of trying to discuss here, perhaps some of the primary reasons behind having this dialogue, or even as the study as a whole in general as well. So, let's sort of start with a bit of basics, that what we actually say when we talk about what is the cost of, what are the externalities, what does the hidden cost sort of represent to. So that externalities sort of refer to some of the indirect cost or benefits of any economic activity that are not generally reflected in its market prices. For example, as we're talking about the coal, it does include some of the cost that is incurred because of the environmental degradation, the health impacts are there. There are always some of the infrastructure wear and tear on reliance of any technology, and there's some other components as well. But in many of the situation, these costs, these hidden or the externalities costs, they are not sort of realized into the energy pricing or different policy decisions that eventually lead to a lot of the impacts that comes to us down the road as well. So, and even one point that is going to be very important as we discuss or move towards the discussion would be the exclusion of these external costs in the tariff structure of Pakistan. I mean, that's actually one of the most important things that needs discussion, because the current electricity tariff structure accounts for direct costs such as the capital investment, fuel, operation, maintenance, and some other costs, but definitely any environmental degradation, health impact, infrastructure strain, all these costs associated with climate change are not actually reflected into the electricity or tariff structures when we sort of talk about them. At the same time, I mean, if you're looking at the coal power projects or even the fossil fuel projects, I'm just going to give you one example, that is of the third coal railway project. So one angle that we have also sort of tried to explore is looking at the overall system from the perspective of any external cost coming out from the transportation, coal quality, as well as its handling, how that actually project is going to be realized, and what is its economic feasibility. So that's the first area that we have sort of started looking into, starting the overall debate from the coal side, and then we'll be sort of going towards other technologies as well. So before again coming towards the study, another impact or another point that is really important is to sort of understand why exactly is assessing this external cost important, or perhaps even more importantly, why is it becoming increasingly important day by day? So I believe I'm just gonna set 2 or 3 points. The first one of which we all fully understand, that we're each one of us actually looking into the climate catastrophe. So with these climate vulnerabilities, what is happening is that climate change is constantly being mainstreamed into the economic reforms, into the economic agenda, not just for the government, but also of the private sector. We have seen it being coming into the policy space through various fronts. For example, I mean, we have looked at how the European Union has introduced its carbon border adjustment mechanisms, where a lot of our export-oriented sector is gonna face a lot of financial challenges. Other than CBAM, there are a lot of, I mean, many other regions are also coming up with their own import compliance mechanisms here as well. And when you look at the climate change, definitely the cost of climate change on any vulnerable country such as Pakistan is extremely high. I mean, if you just look at World Bank's clean country CCDR development report, country climate development report, that also sort of highlights that Pakistan's climate financing needs till 2030 are as high as 348 billion. And just for energy transition, the cost is also rapidly increasing. If we just look at the cost of the floods of 2022, uh, the amount even exceeded 30 billion. And how's that money going to come from? That's money essentially has been coming in from the pockets of the common people, of the communities that are working around. We haven't actually got something very substantial from any of the different financing mechanisms. So reflection of these costs, any of the economic activity, any of the environmental challenge, any of the climate challenge within the economic planning, within the fiscal planning, that's something that's really important. So that's a bit of the basis on which we have been doing a lot of these studies. One thing that we all really understand, and something that is happening, is we all understand that Pakistan is about to sort of, I believe on 9th of May, we are going to do the final round of negotiations on International Monetary Fund, IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Facility, in which we are going to talk about imposition of a carbon tax on Pakistan. And once that actually sort of happens, we all fully understand how the things are gonna change. I mean, in talking about the power generation, talking about the cement industry that relies heavily on the coal, so that industry is going to be we are yet to sort of see what phased approach might be used, but this is something that is actually coming up, and something that we actually have to sort of realize. So how the whole idea here is that how should an integrated planning process considering these external costs should be realized. So that's perhaps a bit of a lengthy sort of a scene setting, and this was actually one of the bases why we actually wanted to have this study. I believe it's been almost 9 months since we have been collecting the data, doing some economic modeling, and the basic idea behind today's discussion is that we'll sort of be presenting you the model that we have sort of finalized. And based on that, we'll look for the expert opinions on different questions. We have some structured question prepared, but with this, I'll be coming to Zainab. Zainab is currently working as a researcher at SDPI, and she is actually one of the lead researchers behind this report as well. So with this, Zainab, I'll be coming to you for the initial presentation of the study, and we'll take it from there. And believe I'll also sort of request all of our distinguished speakers that during their initial interventions, please do let us know your response on the findings. If you still believe there are any other factors that needs to be incorporated, and we'll always open to sort of putting in or incorporating any of the feedbacks or the suggestions that we receive from your end. So with this, thank you so much, Zainab. It's over to you. And I believe MIS team, if you can please allow Zainab to share her screen. Yeah. So thank you so much, Zainab. It's over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. You very rightly set the scene for this presentation. And I'll build on the thing that you mentioned, that there are hidden costs that are indirectly being borne by the public. So let me share my screen first. Just give me a second. Can you please let me know if my screen is visible?
Yes, Zainab, it's visible.
Okay.
Yeah, but you will have to turn on the slide share.
Yeah, I'm good. Okay. So, building on what Ubaid have already mentioned, that there are some hidden costs that are related to that comes from coal power generation and other fossil fuels, and that is being paid by the public indirectly. So, what happens exactly is that if we go back to 10 years ago, what happened at that time was there was a narrative globally that coal is a reliable and affordable source of energy. What true if it's what fact still lies is that coal is definitely a reliable source of energy when it comes to only providing fuel. But if we see the costs and weigh the benefits, then the cost definitely overpowered the benefits. The coal still appears to be an abundant but inexpensive source of energy. But the reason for it to be affordable is that there are costs that are actually hidden. So, coal-based electricity generation imposes significant externalities that are unaccounted in the form of hidden costs in the form of air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, water contamination, and land degradation. Where similarly, it has a significant impact on higher carbon footprint, which can in future affect our exports, leading to in context of the EU's CBAM. So these hidden costs are currently not reflected in our pricing framework, which gives us a distorted signal that these coal is basically an affordable source for power generation, and it brings it at the top of our merit order. So what currently needs to be done is that we need to unveil or reveal these hidden costs so that the deception about this affordability can be understood. So what this basically externalities is basically the hidden cost or the external costs which public bears, discussed earlier, the public bears in terms of medical expenses, environmental degradation, and infrastructural damages, loss of biodiversity, and long-term climate change consequences. We discussed what externalities is. Why we need to measure these externalities is because if we are not going to anchor these costs in the actual pricing framework, there will be a distorted market signal, and we need to monetize these economic costs in the actual pricing framework. So for this, we have conducted a study in which the focus is mainly on measuring the cost of climate damages, the costs that are coming from the health externalities, and the plant-specific emissions differences. The second main focus of the study was we did a comparative analysis that discussed that what is the external costs that are coming from imported coal versus local coal. And for this analysis, we used the real data from the power plants and the pricing tools that are currently operational in Pakistan. The methodology that we used for this analysis is basically that firstly, we defined the scope, that what kind of emissions that what kind of externalities we're gonna estimate, and what would be our focus on. Then we did the data collection, and that was basically we took the actual data from operational performance indices to their tariff differentials to their fuel usage. Then we took some international factors like the IPCC's emission factor and the social cost of carbon values for measuring the actual cost of carbon in Pakistan. Nextly, what we did was we measured the actual cost of these carbons in the form of climate damages and the health cost damages. The next step was, after measuring all these costs, we did a comparative analysis of Sahiwal power plant, which uses the imported coal as fuel source, and the Engro power gen plant, which uses the local, that is Thar coal, as a fuel source. So after all these steps, the last step for our analysis was internalizing these costs that we did measured. And for this, we found a methodology for Pigovian taxation, which we will be discussing further in the next slides. This slide here basically is showing the scope of our study. What we have done here is that we have taken the external costs that are coming from electricity generation and the external costs that are coming from the transportation of the coal that is being used for generating this electricity. Then we measured the emissions that are coming from both of these components and how these emissions are basically leading to the health impacts, which are costing us the number that we will be sharing shortly. And we also did a breakdown of the emissions that are basically coming from these power plants. So these are the parameters, the input variables that we used for the externality analysis. We took the calorific values of the imported coal and the local coal. We measured the thermal efficiency, their heat rates, and we took the amount of coal that is required to create 1 megawatt hour of electricity from the Sahiwal and Engro power plant. Then we estimated their emission factors based on the IPCC numbers, and we converted them into our local context. Okay, so this slide basically here is showing the quantity of imported coal and local coal that is being used to generate 1 terawatt hour of electricity. If you can clearly see here, the blue bars here are representing the units that are generated. There's a stark difference between the amount of electricity that is generated from imported coal versus local coal. So if we see at the case of 2022 or 2023, it's clearly shown that by taking around 7 million metric tons of coal, we are generating 10 million tons of 10 terawatt hours of electricity. Similarly, if we take the case of imported coal, we are taking 6 million metric tons of coal to generate 10 million metric ton, 10 or so roughly around 11 terawatt hours of coal. So there is a difference in the intensity of inputs that are required to generate the same amount of output. So based on these numbers, we made a coal consumption ratio. Coal consumption ratio basically tells you that how much coal is required to generate the same amount of electricity from imported or local coal. So that estimation was around 2.19. Similarly, in our analysis, we have converted some dollar internationally given values of dollar into Pakistani rupee. For that, we have used the exchange rate of 278. So these are basically the equations or a kind of a short depiction of our analysis that what we did. We firstly measured the amount of CO2 that is coming from the transportation as well as from electricity generation. Secondly, we measured the cost of these CO2 emissions that are coming from generation and transportation. Then we actually measured the transport cost and the transport emissions cost. After measuring all these three cost components, one is about carbon damages, the health cost, and the emissions from transportation and generation, we gathered the total externality cost. So this graph basically here is showing that mainly the annual CO2 emissions that are coming from the coal are 26.9% of the total emissions. And in our analysis we focused on carbon emissions only, because the emissions that are coming from coal is around 80 to 90% carbon emissions. So we'll be calculating the carbon emissions only. Next, if we see the sector-wise breakdown of CO2 emissions, we can see that 18% of the total emissions are coming from the energy sector, and 24% of these overall emissions are coming from the transport sector. What this thing implies is that coal, along with other fossil fuels, remains a dominant source of pollution in the energy sector. So what we have done here is that we did measured the cost of climate damages, or the cost of carbon damages, or CO2 estimations. For this, we have used the social cost of carbon approach. The social cost of carbon approach is basically a policy tool that estimates the present value of future climate damages caused by the emissions of 1 additional ton of CO2. It basically enables the government to internalize these hidden costs into the economic and energy decision making. The value as per the standards is $51 per ton of CO2. If we convert this $51 into our local currency, it comes around rupees 14,200 per ton. And if we convert them to get a number of per kg of CO2, that is rupees 14.21 per kg of CO2. So now we have got the number for CO2 emission. Like if we emit 1 kg of CO2, this is the cost that we're gonna bear directly or indirectly. So now we need to know that how much CO2 is being emitted when we generate 1 megawatt of electricity from Sahiwal coal and Angro power plant. So you can see that if we for this estimation, we have used the heat rate, the emission factor, and the conversion factors. The amount that comes from Angro power plant is 2154 kg per megawatt hour, whereas the amount that comes from Sahiwal coal is around 887 kg per megawatt hour. Building on these numbers, now we're going to measure the cost that is being incurred by the system for these CO2 emissions. So we're going to multiply this number of CO2 emissions with the price that we measured earlier for the carbon cost, or what we call the cost of climate damage. So that for the Angro power generator is around 30,609 rupees per megawatt hour. For Sahiwal, it is around 12,606 rupees per megawatt hour. What this number here is telling us is that when we are producing 1 megawatt hour of electricity, we are basically creating a cost of 30,600 rupees, okay, which is not currently included in our pricing framework. Similarly, for Sahiwal coal, that is around 12,000 rupees per megawatt hour. So moving forward, this is the first component of our analysis, that is the CO2 cost estimation, or the cost of carbon damages. The next component of our costing analysis was the cost of transport emissions. For this, we firstly took the cost that is being incurred for transporting the amount of coal that is required to generate 1 megawatt hour of electricity, and that number is 780. So that number is 780 rupees per megawatt hour. So emissions cost, sorry. So the emissions cost for Sahiwal coal power plant is total coal required is 375.5 kg to generate 1 megawatt hour electricity. Similarly, for total CO2 emissions, we have 6.17.27 kg for emissions for generating 1 megawatt hour of electricity from Sahiwal coal plant. And for CO2 transport emissions, we have 85.36 kg per megawatt hour, and similarly for CO2 generation emissions, we have 53.91 kg. Based on these numbers, if we try to calculate the share of transport emission, it comes around 13.8% of the total emissions. Sorry. So again, moving forward, if we calculate the share of electricity emissions that are coming from electricity generation, that is basically 86.2%. Multiplying this 13.8% of the value that we just measured to the total emissions cost, that comes around 1,212 rupees per megawatt hour. What this number is basically telling us is that when we're transporting an amount of coal that is used to produce 1 megawatt hour of electricity, through CO2 transport emissions, we are creating this cost on the system. That is 1,212 rupees. So moving forward, similarly, if we use the same formula for power engro power, sorry. So this we have that 861 kilograms of coal is required to produce 1 megawatt hour of electricity. And if we convert this number into the total amount of CO2 that will be generated, that is around 1416.64 kg. If we extract the share of emissions, the transport emissions that was earlier measured, 13.8%, we got a number of 19.50 kg of CO2. So if we multiply this 19.5 into the total, our cost of carbon damages that we measured earlier was 14.21. We got this number that is around 2,778 rupees per megawatt of electricity. So these numbers are basically showing all the costs that are being incurred but are not incorporated in the system, in the pricing framework mainly. So now we have made the two cost components. Firstly, the cost of carbon damages, then the cost of transport emissions. Now we're going to measure the cost of health externalities. So as discussed earlier, the health externalities come in the way of indirect externalities that are being borne by public, and that basically comes in terms of premature mortality from long-term exposure to these pollutants, and it's valued at around $33,000 per year. There are new cases of chronic bronchitis that are estimated around $58,000 per incident. The short-term mortality from these pollutants reaches around $57,000 per year of life loss. There are hospital admissions due to these respiratory issues that basically are very high in those areas which are near to these power plants and these coal mining stations. These value around at $1,494 per case. If we take the mild respiratory symptoms in adults and children, it is valued at around $2.63 per episode of these symptoms. So based on these numbers, we did the health damage valuation, and as per our estimates, we got this number that is $15.98 of health externalities comes when we generate 1 megawatt hour of electricity from coal. So building on this number, if we convert them into our local currency, we got that from Sahiwal coal, rupees 44.52 rupees per megawatt hour of health externalities come when we generate 1 megawatt of electricity. Similarly, for Engro Power Gen, the amount is rupees 7,123 rupees per megawatt hour. So now we have measured the three cost components of analysis, that are the CO2 emissions cost, the cost of climate damages, secondly, the transport emissions cost, then the health cost. So summing up all these three numbers will give us this total externality cost, which is around 18,271 rupees for Sahiwal coal. This number is showing that 18,200 rupees of external cost is being incurred when we are generating only 1 megawatt hour of electricity from Sahiwal coal. Similarly, if we sum up the numbers for of our analysis from Engro, the number is around 40,392.72 rupees per megawatt hour. The current pricing framework and the merit order says that the price for this number, like for Sahiwal, is currently around roughly 16,700 or 800 rupees. What we can see the difference in two numbers. It's basically not the difference, 16,000, 18,000. These needs to be summed up together to have an actual cost of externality, or we can call the actual price of power generation from coal. So we need to sum up these 18,000 with the 16,000. Then we'll get the actual price. So if we're not summing up, this is the situation that we're currently living in. That is the situation of market distortion, where the actual price is different from the market price. So now, as we have got the numbers, the total externality cost, which is around 18.27 per kilowatt hour for Sahiwal and 40 rupees per megawatt for Engro. So now we have got the numbers. Now, what needs to be done next is to internalize these numbers. And how we can internalize these numbers is the Pigovian tax. This Pigovian tax is not something that is coming up in the last few years, or it's not a new phenomena. It's been there from past many centuries. Like in early 1920s, the British economist Pigot presented that, found this phenomenon. He presented that each emitter should pay the societal cost of the damage caused by their emissions via an inappropriate price. So what is happening, if you look at this graph, what is happening here is usually in economics or in real market price, what happens is that this point is the price where we take the price from the consumer or producer. Demand curve meets the supply curve. But in case of the phenomena where the externality costs are high, like the phenomena where we're generating power from different fossil fuel sources, the externality costs are high. So we need to include these societal costs, which we call them the external cost or hidden cost, whatever we call them. We need to include these costs. And if we include these costs, the cost comes from this point to this. So this difference is the market distortion, or what we can call the market failure, to collectively sum up the actual price that are being incurred. What the Pigovian tax says is basically that polluter must pay the full price, right? So it encourages firms and consumers to make socially optimal choices. So building on that, we have observed that in recent years, there is a grand shift. Different countries are moving away, mainly developed countries are moving away from coal, and they are shifting towards mechanisms to introduce carbon pricing. And to add here is that developing countries are not moving at that pace. Why? Because we do need a facilitating mechanism or a strong supporting mechanism to incur these changes in our system. So while talking about the developed countries, we have seen that over 70 countries have implemented or scheduled carbon pricing mechanisms. If we take the example of Sweden have introduced $130 per ton CO2 with economic growth and emission reduction conditions. Then we have Canada. Canada introduced a revenue neutral model to offset household costs. Pakistan should also adopt a revenue neutral model. What this model says is we will be discussing further in the next slides. Similarly, Denmark have introduced recently a first methane tax on livestock, and it is planned to be implemented effective from 2030. So building on what Pakistan's numbers presents and what the case of and situation of Pakistan is, we have done a case study to replicate the model of, or to learn from the international best practices in the region. We come up with the case of Singapore. Singapore is the first South Asian country to introduce a carbon tax in 2019. So what they did was they call it a strategic market signal model. They gave a signal to the market that we are going to introduce the carbon tax with like very small number, the Singaporean dollar of $5 per ton of CO2, which is not huge number in terms of money or monetary value. So with that, they introduced a phased approach or scheduled increase. In 2025, they increased this number of $5 Singaporean dollar to 25. And then they planned that to increase this to 45 and eventually to 50 to $80 per ton by 2030. This whole carbon taxation mechanism basically applies to large emitters that facilitates emissions greater than or equal to 25,000 tons of CO2 annually. And it covers all the sectors that are intensively emitting emissions. That includes energy, waste, manufacturing, and other sectors as well. What policy design and use of revenue that Singapore followed was they used the revenues that are coming from this carbon taxation for green initiatives. That basically included the clean energy, the grid modernization and resilience, the climate adaptation and infrastructure. And what thing that Singapore did that is they, unlike emission trading schemes, they caused the emitters to pay in full, creating a strong price signal. No exemptions were given to, or no allowances were given to the emitters. They were also designed the tax in a simple and transparent and predictable way for long-term investment plannings to make it easy for the industries to understand that what's going to come, how this overall carbon tax is going to impact their work, so they can design their strategies accordingly. Similarly, Singapore positions the tax as part of their Clean Plan 2030, and they have an ambition to reach net zero by 2050. Pakistan can learn a lot of lessons from Singapore's case study and Singapore's plan of imposing carbon tax. So, as I mentioned earlier, that to apply any such mechanism, Pakistan needs a strong support. That strong support could be like in terms of RSF. So if we look at the history of RSF, basically RSF was launched in 2020, and the aim of RSF was to offer long-term low-interest loans for climate-linked reforms. The countries like Costa Rica, Rwanda, and Barbados have linked RSF to carbon pricing, and RSF provides Pakistan a path to align its fiscal and climate goals. The current status of RSF in Pakistan is that in March 2025, Pakistan reached a staff level agreement with IMF, and that provided Pakistan with a climate linked funding of around rupees not dollars, 1.3 billion. And the focus of this RSF plan is to enhance disaster resilience, climate adaptation budgeting, and to align the energy reforms with the mitigation targets. Under this RSF program, the IMF have asked Pakistan to impose a carbon levy on hydrocarbons, which includes specifically the petroleum products and can add and coal as well. So what they have recommended is that starting carbon levy should be around rupees 3 to 5 liters or equivalent with the gradual increase that happened in the case of Singapore that we discussed earlier. So, what as mentioned earlier, the Pakistan should use the model of Canada. That was revenue coming from this carbon taxation should be invested in climate-related public expenditures. And the government response to this overall RSF scheme was they have expressed some concerns over overall economic impact and industry and growth, which is very understandable in case of countries like Pakistan, where it's not very easy to impose tax. But for long-term sustainability, we definitely need to impose these tax. And there are ongoing negotiations to balance these fiscal reforms with economic feasibility. So moving forward, based on our analysis on the case studies that we have done and the situation of our current coal landscape, what we recommend is that the government should introduce a carbon tax on coal-based power generation, and that should follow a similar approach of phased increase in price like the Singapore did. So what it says is that we need to consider implementing a Pigovian tax, or we can call this a carbon tax, which can be equivalent to the social cost of carbon to externalize these environmental externalities. There should be differential rates of carbon for local and imported coals, because the price that we measured earlier was different. The external cost that is coming from local and imported coal is different. So there should be differentiated rates to reflect the site-specific emissions and transport-related impacts. Similarly, a mechanism should be established for revenue neutrality through climate-aligned redistribution. We need to channel these carbon tax revenues into public investments in renewable energy, rural electrification, and the climate resilient infrastructure. There is also a need to establish direct cash transfer programs or rebates for low-income households to offset potential regressive effects and maintain public support. Also, we need to strengthen the institutional capacity for monitoring and compliance of internalizing these externalities. We need to develop an integrated carbon accounting framework at the plant level. Similarly, the government should take the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Fund as an opportunity to commit to the carbon pricing reforms under the RSF to unlock concessional climate finance. Also, we need to align the fiscal and energy policies with the international decarbonization pathways. It's one of the most crucial things that I believe we need to do, because to meet the global standards like the upcoming EU CBAM, we need to follow these decarbonization pathways so our exports or our industry stays competitive globally. Also, the government should strategically plan to phase out the inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, gradually shifting subsidies from fossil fuels to cleaner deployment and innovation. We need to protect the vulnerable groups through targeted energy support schemes or social safety net. Lastly, the government should promote the carbon market readiness. We need to operationalize the MOCC's Ministry of Climate Change policy guidelines for the carbon trading. We need to have a domestic emission trading system as a complementary mechanism to carbon taxation that could enable cross-sectoral emission reduction at a lower economic cost. So, with this, I would like to thank you all for listening. Please feel free to suggest or provide any further input that you would like to enhance this overall analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senap, for very comprehensive presentation, taking us through different contours. What are some of the very key findings coming out of the discussion? And thank you for showing us those numbers. So yeah, just to sort of very quickly sum up. So when you're talking about the cost of externalities, we're talking about the cost coming from the emissions, cost coming from the additional transport, the health cost is incorporated. But a very pertinent point to be noted here is the difference that I've sort of felt such a substantial difference between the external cost of reliance on the imported as and the local coal. So that, I mean, given the conditions that the local coal is, I mean, we fully understand that the government of Pakistan has made it very clear that it will not sort of make any further expansion for the imported coal, but the local coal is still in the planning process. So perhaps something that needs really strong considerations. And definitely this is, what we eventually have to discuss back and forth is that carbon taxation is something that's eventually going to come in, especially when Pakistan is going under the RSF. So these numbers, they need a lot more discussion at the policy level as well. Again, just like Zana mentioned, we're more than happy to discuss this further. So with this, I'll be firstly coming to it. Shakib Saab, I'll be coming to you a bit shortly, but perhaps looking from the perspective of some of the very initially the key individuals who have remained in these tariffs debates, tariff designing process for long. So perhaps firstly listening a bit from them on what their perspectives are, how do they sort of see the whole debate, and perhaps, Zainab, thank you for showing us some of the international case studies, but looking at some of the demographies similar to that of Pakistan, looking at some of our neighboring countries, or perhaps the developing or the even the underdeveloped economies, how does these externalities have been historically translated into their planning process? Perhaps something that we also need to put at the same front while we're discussing the models of either Canada and Denmark that you have sort of showed. So firstly, I'll come to, thank you so much again, Ayub Saab. You, I believe from the esteemed panel that we have here, you have one of the very leading experts. So based on, the topic or the debate that we're sort of doing here and the findings that Zanab has presented from an extensive data collection that we did and the modeling that we did, and given your experience overseeing Pakistan's transmission and distribution framework, how do you assess the feasibility of integrating any fossil fuels, environment, and health externalities into Pakistan's electricity tariff structure, and if what institutional or any technical barriers need to be addressed to make such internalization effective and equitable? So, but other than that, if you want to respond to any of the other points as well, please feel free to do so. So with this, thank you so much, sir. I think it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. I'd like to thank you, the organizers, for hosting this crucial discussion. Today topics, examining the true cost of the coal power in Pakistan through the lens of energy, economy, and environment is time and deeply significant as we stand at a crucial crossroad in our energy policies. No, the points are this one, that energy, first we will see that what is our energy perspective. From an energy standpoint, coal-fired power plant have contributed to energy security by diversifying our energy mix, especially after the 2013 energy crisis. Indigenous coal from Thal has reduced import dependency to some extent. However, there are the key limitations. Coal plants are often inflexible and not well situated to handle variable load or support a transition toward renewables. The long-term operational and maintenance challenges, particularly in high ash content, leginate coal from Thal are suffering. Coal generation are also suffer from low efficiency and water intensive cooling requirement, which strain water sources scarce region. Number one. Number second is the economical perspectives. The economic cost of the coal goes well beyond the tariff on paper. While coal may appear cheap initially, the actual cost include capacity payment, imported coal, price validity, foreign exchange losses, and subsidized and circular debts. The third one is the environmental perspectives. Air pollution, uh, uh, especially particulate matter and sulfur oxide, contribute to health crises in urban and semi-urban areas. Now, in summary, as E3 analysis clearly shows that the real cost of coal in Pakistan is much higher than perceived. We must move toward a balanced energy portfolio with a greater share of renewable, improved grid flexibility, and energy efficiency. A just and inclusive transition must be part of this conversation so that the communities currently reliant on a coal are not left behind. The time to act is now, not after the cost become unbearable. Now your question is the feasibility of integration fossil fuel externalities in Pakistan electricity tariff structure. Now this one is the integrity, environmental and health externalities such as air pollution, carbon emission, and public health cost into Pakistan electricity tariff structure is conceptually feasible, but particularly challenging. The process often referred to as internalizing externalities aligned with goal, sustainability goal, and send price signal that promote clear generation. However, Pakistan current electricity market is not yet fully cost effective even in term of generation capacity and operational cost. Tariff setting is heavily influenced by socio political consideration, which make it difficult to introduce a new cost element like environmental externalities without strong institutional backing. Now, the lack of legal mandate. NEPRA, the regulator, currently does not have a clear mandate or methodology for monitoring and incorporating externalities into tariff. Number is the policy ambiguity. There is a clear ambiguity in the policies which cannot clearly say that how we can handle this one, while the alternatively and renewable energy policy 2019 and climate change policy recognized environmental concern. There is no binding requirement for fossil fuel cost internalization. The third one is the interagency coordination gap. Effective integration would require collaboration among NEPRA, the Ministry of Energy, and Ministry of Climate Change, and provincial environmental protection agencies, which is presently weak. Technical barrier, data efficiency. Now you see that we have a data deficiency, accurate estimation of emission and health impact from fossil fuel plant is lacking. I am very glad to see that Zenab presentation, that was a very good one, and it's looked at that they have make a hard work on it and getting these figures. But I think these figures need to be reviewed with so that it should be rationalized that these figures are the 100% correct. Then lack of pricing model, no standard carbon pricing or externality costing model are currently adopted in Pakistan. Tariff methodology constraint The current tariff determination methodology is not flexible enough to accommodate non-monetary costs such as the health and environmental impact. What need to be done? Amend NEPA Act or introduce policy directive mandating internalization of externalities. Develop localized environmental costing methodology, possibly starting with shadow carbon price. Enhance institutional coordination to integrate environmental and energy planning. So I think these are the my comments, which I think it should be implemented. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ayub Saab. I believe extremely valid points, especially the overall environment that you have mentioned, in which we fully understand. I mean, being very honest, while we were sort of discussing, we were talking to different stakeholders, and we fully understand that the solution that we're proposing is not that easy, given the whole uh, tariff governance system that we have, the how difficult it would be to sort of bring in a component that's not been there traditionally. So fully understand this the challenge that does exist. And thank you so much for highlighting the coordination gap that needs to be addressed, the interagency gap that needs to be addressed. So I believe, I mean, the understanding is there that we all do understand that definitely the call, the reliance on coal has an external cost, and at the same time, perhaps we really need to sort of perhaps again all sit down together and uh, try to sort of understand how this can actually be taken forward. So, but perhaps before coming to Badr Saab, let me sort of bring the same question to Ms. Kuratulen. Kuratulen, thank you so much again for joining us from EMC. So, sort of looking at the very central role of PPMC in power procurement, market settlement, how do you think how we can actually incorporate the environmental and health externalities of coal into the existing cost-based tariff models that exist? And is there any sort of a room within the current market design to introduce any carbon-adjusted pricing or environmental cost adders in power purchase agreements as well? So any point that you would like to sort of respond to? So thank you so much, Kurat, for joining us. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you, SDK, for the opportunity to speak on this important as well as a very timely topic. Secondly, I would like to commend the entire team for conducting such a comprehensive study. Splendid work done that highlights the implications of environmental externalities on coal pricing, and as well as for future of power sector economics. Let me begin by acknowledging that Pakistan's existing cost-based tariff models do not currently account for the environment and health externalities associated with coal-fired power generation. Similarly, these considerations are also absent from the existing power purchase agreements. Traditionally, our tariff structures, as you've also mentioned, have based on direct financial inputs that include the fuel costs, the fixed O&M costs, as well as the capacity charges, without capturing the shadow costs or the externalities regarding the environmental as well as the social costs that these fossil fuels may implicate. However, this gap is now being recognized at the policy level. I would like to refer to the National Electricity Plan 2023 to 2027, the 5-year horizon National Electricity Plan. It has a dedicated priority area of decarbonization, in which its strategic directive, I'm pretty sure it's strategic directive 95, that deals with this is a national priority at the moment, that we start to mandate the externalities of different emissions, carbon emissions from in the power sector. So this specific strategic directive identifies decarbonization as a key national priority it explicitly mandates that the regular assessment of the shadow costs of carbon emissions across the power sector. Now, the true costs are built by a combination of both the the direct costs, which are at the moment implicated in our tariff models, and as well as the shadow costs. Combination of these both refer to the true costs. So while the actual internalization of these costs, whether in tariff or whether in the contractual agreements, the power purchase agreements which we are discussing, remain subject to government's approval, that too on case-to-case basis, the policy direction at least is now clear and forward-looking based on the directives the plan mandates. At the present, although environment and health externalities are not yet embedded as for in the PPAs, the groundwork has been laid. From the perspective of our department at PPMC, this is an opportunity to enhance the long-term planning. Our team is also involved in performing sensitivity analysis on cost-based models. We have developed our own tariff-based models, and we perform these sensitivities, sensitivity analysis of different environmental externalities as well as health externalities to, better understand the impact on the dispatch as well as the settlement decisions. But that is primarily at the internal assessment basis in our own department. These internal assessments are, playing a crucial role in supporting the evidence-based policy making. Moreover, indirectly, the National Electricity Plan also further reinforces the direction of targeting around 65% of its power generation, of our country's power generation, through renewable clean energy sources by 2030. So that is also an indirect way of, combating this carbon emissions as well as decarbonization concept. So yeah, that would be my answer to the first part of the question.
Yeah.
Walking through the second question regarding mechanisms in context of Pakistan's shift towards a competitive market and reduction of carbon levy under the RSF-supported reform agenda. The plan rightly notes that instruments like carbon levy must be introduced with careful impact analysis, especially in a country where affordability and consumer protection is of paramount importance. So as I already discussed in the first part of the question, that the government has already envisaged economy-wide shadow cost assessment, not just for coal, but for the entire power sector, different fossil fuel-based commodities. This assessment will be carried out. This will be conducted in coordination with Ministry of Climate Change, and it has a dedicated performance indicator in the plan, National Electricity Plan, and we are overseeing its development at the moment. Once this assessment is complete and the implications of end consumers, what the implications of this shadow costs would be on the consumers and overall system costs are fully understood, we will be in a strong position to support the development of practical mechanisms to reflect these externalities in the market operations. This could take a form of carbon-adjusted dispatch simulations, differentiated pricing models, or incentive structures that would favor clean energy generation. However, it needs strong emphasis needs to be made that any internalization of these externalities, be it environmental or be it health or be it transport, whether in market settlements, tariffs, or in power purchase agreements, will ultimately depend on the clear policy direction and regulatory endorsement of the government. Having said that, while we are still in the early stages, the enabling framework for integrating these externalities into the Pakistan's power sector has been initiated, and the reference would be the plan itself. At PPMC, we are aligning our analytical tools and modeling capabilities as well to support this transition, ensuring that the future reforms are grounded in robust data-driven analysis, as well as aligned with the broader decarbonization goals that are, internationally being promoted as well in our country. We are moving towards it, and yeah, that's all from my side.
Yes, no, thank you so much. Good, that's very well summarized, and thank you for sort of highlighting the direction of the country planning process. And yes, thank you for highlighting that perhaps this is not something that's coming if directly within the tariffs, but perhaps there's some of the indirect ways through which it's sort of
Yeah.
being the government is sort of trying, particularly under the broader umbrella of the NEP 2027, and how it is, thank you for highlighting how it is increasingly becoming a priority within the planning process. And I'll sort of here pick one of the very important points which Kurit has mentioned is the opportunity of doing some long-term planning. That's, I believe, very centric. The integrated long-term planning is very centric. As we discussed all of these points, so thank you so much for highlighting these. With this, let me come to Barasab. You have thank you so much, Barasab, for joining us. Barasab is currently the CEO of Pride. Barasab, I mean, you have heard some of the numbers from the study. You have also looked at some of the points that have been highlighted by Ayub Saab as well as Kurat. But let's talk a bit from a people-centric development perspective as well. I mean, how do you see these integration of coal's environmental and social externalities impacting vulnerable communities in Pakistan, and how can energy pricing reforms be designed to ensure that financial burden of these reforms does not disproportionately affect low income and marginalized populations, because that's exactly the wrong climate injustice perhaps that we are observing because of such reliance on these fossil fuel side as well. And also, given your expertise in the policy oriented research, if you have any particular role do you think should public participation play in formulation of these carbon taxation policies as well? So with this, Barasab, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ved. Thank you, SDPI, for arranging this very important discussion. This is very important on this very important topic. I think there are a number of things that need to be taken into consideration when we think about the hidden costs of coal in Pakistan. Like, for instance, okay, we are not talking about social cost of carbon. But why aren't we talking about the costs that are actually taking place on the ground, like the contamination of local water resources, the contamination of local environment, air, atmosphere, and then also all the investments that the government has made on the behalf of the coal development companies in order to extract coal from that area. Like all the roads that have been built, they've been built with the money that the government of Pakistan has provided. So shouldn't we include the cost of those roads as well in the cost of the coal that we're using in our power production? So the list for hidden costs goes as long as the distance between Thar and Islamabad is. I mean, it's very, very long. So at every step of the way, you will find that there are so many costs that people do not even mention when they talk about hidden costs. But Zainab has very expertly pointed out the social cost of carbon that is not included in the energy prices being produced from the coal power plant. I will highlight only three aspects of it. One aspect is that this is not the time to ignore social cost of carbon anymore. Even in the US, there is a report that has come about only last week, and it is not a report done by SDPI or Pride or any public centered think tank, but by the University of Chicago, which is the biggest like proponent of capitalist economy, and Wharton School, which is one of the most known business schools in the world and is run by the Pennsylvania University in the US. And they both say that up to 2050, all American companies will emit carbon worth $87 trillion. $87 trillion is an amount that I cannot even imagine. I cannot even imagine a few $100,000 coming from a poor country, what to talk about trillions of dollars, and not just 1 trillion or 2 trillion, it's $87 trillion. And this is the social cost of carbon being emitted by the American companies. The astonishing fact is that this cost is 1.3 times higher than the equity of these companies. The investments that these companies have made, this cost is higher than that investment by a factor of 1.3 times. So the world increasingly and very strongly is realizing that the cost of carbon is very high. And that cost of carbon, as Zainab has rightly pointed out, is measured in terms of hospital visits, in terms of productivity gone waste because of health problems of people, and so many other factors that really are impacting the growth of countries like us. So, given this scenario, it is very important that we at least keep highlighting that there is a very steep social cost of carbon, and without understanding that social cost of carbon, we can never start the process of including that cost of carbon in the energy costs that we pay or that we give to the companies. So it's a great starting point that SDPI has taken a step in the right direction. And of course, other partners of SDPI will be very happy to take such studies forward with some ground-based surveys and other things. But having said that, this is a very good step in the right direction. So, what is the situation on the ground? The situation on the ground is that Thar is a water scarce region, as Ayub Saab has rightly pointed out, and Thar is running out of water, at least in those areas where these power plants are working, because a huge amount of water is required for these plants to do various activities that they need to do. And as a result, the government has to bring in water from other parts of the province of Sindh. And that transfer of water, number one, is happening at the cost of farmers who are already suffering from acute water shortages in the river of Sindh. Secondly, they will be brought to the power plants through schemes that will be financed from province's public sector development program. Again, the taxpayer will be paying for the water supply programs to the power plants. So who will bear the cost of that? So, and secondly, I must add this. Generally, the formula is okay, social cost of carbon should be included in this, but then who will pay that cost? If that cost under IMF formulas is passed on to the consumers, then I think it's an extra burden on Pakistanis who are already suffering from very high energy costs. They cannot bear any additions to the cost of energy that they are already paying. So the question of who will pay this social cost of carbon is very, very important. That is why I think when we say that there should be a carbon tax and there should be a carbon levy, we need to be very, very careful. We need to be very cautious. If that carbon levy is at the end of the day has to be paid by Ubaid and myself, then I think it will be another injustice that this system will be inflicting upon us. This levy should be imposed or enforced on the money that the companies are making from coal power generation, from the profits that they are making from the coal power generation. So instead of burdening the consumers with these additional costs, the additional levies should reflect in the tariff in such a way that they do not need to be paid by the end consumer, but by the companies themselves from their profits, from the money that they make. So this is suggestion number one that I make. The other suggestion that I want to make is that there needs to be a detailed study done on at least two power plants in Pakistan. Yes, Zainab has done all the mathematical calculations, but from my own experience on the ground, you will see that the social cost of carbon are not just about carbon emissions. They are also about so many other factors, Like a couple of weeks ago, I went to the area where Saiwal power plant is located, and we found out that crop yield there has decreased drastically. In at least two villages, people have visibly become poorer than they were 10 years ago. So that part of social cost also needs to be measured in any detailed study that all of us can do together, including the government of Pakistan contributing to that. So I think this is the cost that we are paying, and if we continue to say that coal is providing us energy security, we will be reaching a stage in the next 10 years when we will be saying that, okay, this energy security is coming at the cost of the people in whose area these power plants are working. People there will become poorer, they will become more sick than they already were, and they will definitely be hurt by the environmental and water-related hazards that they are already suffering from. So, without taking into consideration all these things, we cannot measure the real cost of carbon. And if and when we can do that measurement, then we should sit down with the policymakers and say, okay, if you can't include, and you should not include it in the tariff that the consumers are paying, include it somewhere where these companies which are responsible for all these emissions and all these environmental hazards should be paying this cost. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. But it's up to extremely important points, especially thank you initially for highlighting the significance. But that's really important point is where should this cost be reflected? And that's again extremely important. And we'll also sort of get back on this discussion a bit. And Ali Nawaz Sahab, we have been joined by Ali Nawaz Sahab from PPIB. Ali Nawaz Sahab will just be coming to you in just next 3 to 4 minutes for your interventions. But I believe we first have Helen with us. Helen is from CPD Bangladesh. So, Helen, a question from you is before going to Ali Nawaz Sahab and Zubair and Umar. Bangladesh has also relied on coal and other fossil fuels in its energy mix, but is now increasingly shifting towards renewables. So, from your perspectives, what policy tools of fiscal measures has Bangladesh explored to account for any environmental externalities? And if there are any lessons Pakistan can draw from that experience in pricing and the planning reforms. So with this, thank you so much for joining us. Helen, over to you.
Hello, I'm audible. Okay, so I would first like to thank SDPI for organizing such an event, and thanks for inviting me to speak on this matter. Appreciation for my friend Zainab. Very well done. So before that, what I would like to say that in Bangladesh, we think that we need to learn from Pakistan. I don't know whether you got the data wrong or something messed up, because we really appreciate how the renewable energy in Pakistan has developed in last 1 or 2 years. So actually from CPD, we were looking into that what sort of researches needs to be done in order to follow your path. So appreciation to that. Before going into Bangladesh policies and in fiscal measures, what I would like to do is I would like to give you a brief overview of how Bangladesh's fuel mix is right now looking like. Historically, Bangladesh has been heavily dependent on fossil fuel, mainly on gas. 50% of our installed power generation capacity is dependent on gas, because there was an assumption that Bangladesh is practically floating on natural gas, which later on proved that is not so right. So we had mostly gas. Almost for 50% of our power generation capacity is based on gas. Then comes oil and coal. By 2026, we plan to phase out all the HSD, that means furnace oil and diesel oil-based power plants. So that's on our plan. But regarding coal, we are facing now a huge problem. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. In COP26, our then Prime Minister announced that in Bangladesh there will be no new coal, and 10 coal-based power plants were scrapped with the idea that we are moving towards net zero transition, so we will not be producing any more power from coal. But unfortunately, right now, the coal share is almost 21%. Which used to be 10 to 11% in prior, I mean, only 4 or 5 years ago. So we got mega projects that are dependent on coals, like 3-4 power plants, which has the capacity of 1,200 to 3,600 megawatt. So now coal has been added to the fuel mix, and sort of we are moving backwards to the energy transition. Parallelly, the transition to renewable energy has not been that fast, which was estimated. So we have the target of achieving 40% of renewable energy by 2041, and we are at 2025 now, and we have less than 5% share of renewable energy in our fuel mix. So now we are looking into ways that how can possibly Bangladesh attain that 40% target. Right now, it's both combining both off-grid and on-grid. We have a share of 4.5% from solar, wind, and hydro. So we are hugely lagging behind. So that's why we think that sort of it is going backwards. But fortunately, after the political shift of Bangladesh, we have seen some progress. So the new government, under the new chief advisor's agenda, he has an agenda of 3 zeros. So zero carbon emission comes under that zero. So now we are looking into some progresses. New LOIs have been submitted, new tenders have been submitted, and at the same time, 37 old LOIs have been cancelled, which included gas, renewable, and all sorts of fuels. So that is a good point, that we are now progressing slowly, but gradually progressing towards renewable energy. What worked for Bangladesh is basically the economical cost of fossil fuel, particularly coal, is so high, even without the social cost embedded. The economical cost itself is so high that Bangladesh currently have no other choice to gradually move forward renewable energy, whether it's coal or not. I mean, if I give you some data, even coal-based power generation is costing us 20 Bangladeshi taka. I mean, like that's 20 bucks. So it's expensive. We are giving that electricity to the consumer, half of that price, half comes from subsidy. So it's expensive. Even for Bangladesh, coal is not cheap. So that is actually working in favor of Bangladesh, that Bangladesh is now thinking about a sort of reshuffling the fuel mix, because fossil fuel is expensive. We have to import fossil fuel. We have no fuel mix of our own. We have very little amount of gas. So if we want to produce from gas, we have to import LNG, we have to import furnace oil, diesel oil, we have to import coal. So this comes with a very hefty price tag. Currently, Bangladesh is suffering in continuous debt cycle. If I give you the number of this year's ongoing year subsidy, 5 billion USD has been allocated as a subsidy for power sector only. And all of this amount will be used to settle the import bills and capacity charges. So we do not have any other option but to go towards energy transition. So with or without the social cost embedded. So that's what is working for Bangladesh, nothing else. Because similarly, like Pakistan, Bangladesh's energy sector, power sector is so heavily influenced by the socio-political paradigm. So nothing really works here. Similarly, we have different sets of tariffs for different power plants due to the agenda of the last political government. Some oligarch companies were getting more tariffs compared to the other companies. So these things are similar between Pakistan and Bangladesh. So we have to go to renewable just to save our reserve, just to save our resources, nothing else. And also Bangladesh is also the recipient of the IMF's RSF fund. We received 1.4 billion US dollars as a part of that fund. Our conditionalities are a bit different from Pakistan, I think so, because two of our key agendas are we have to phase out this subsidy by 2026 and have to phase out completely. There will be no subsidies by 2026. And we have to go to market-based fuel pricing system. So if you go to market reflecting pricing system, I think renewable energy automatically gets a leverage. Because there are multiple studies have been conducted to show that renewable energy is actually the cheapest cost to produce electricity. And there is no doubt about that. We should not be actually debating on this issue because it will be the cheapest cost. So we are now trying to we have already adopted the market-based pricing system for diesel, kerosene, octane, basically the imported oils. Now we are thinking about doing that for LNG as well, because LNG has been cutting our pockets so deep right now that we now have to go to the
Helen,
market.
just in interest of time, if you can sort of conclude the last point in a
Yes,
minute.
yes, of course. So that is something that we are looking into. We are currently working on the RSF agendas. But like I said, I think if we go for market reflecting price, that would be good enough. And lastly, regarding the carbon taxation, in a country like Bangladesh, one problem is that what we think, instruments such as carbon tax and carbon credit trading can actually sometimes backfire, like the previous speaker mentioned. This can give the power producers a point that, okay, I am emitting, but I'm paying the price. So let me emit, I will keep paying the price. So this can be a huge problem if it is not monitored accurately. So we have to keep that in mind as well, because we have observed this type of attitude in power producers that, okay, I'll emit, I'll pay the price. And that price will be actually, fall into the burden of the consumers, because that was actually happening under the IMF conditionality last year under the last regime. Power tariff was increased four times a year. It's crazy. So there is something that we really need to look into. But with that being said, actually this is the future. We have to start gradually move towards that. If now, but if maybe in sooner or later future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Thank you.
Definitely. Pakistan is currently one of the leading success stories at the same time for the renewable energy development, and something that is led by the people as well. I mean, the whole renewable energy definitely there have been initially some government supporting policies, but the recent solar PV uptake, solar rush, and very unprecedented growth, that's a lot led by the people. And yes, that's there. But so with this, let me come to before, we'll just to sort of bit of that we will be going like 14 to 15 minutes above the time. So sorry for that in advance. But before coming to Zubair and Umar, let me come to Ali Nawaz. Ali Nawaz, thank you so much for joining us. We were sort of thinking of planning to have the whole bilateral discussion with you just bilaterally on this whole debate as soon as the report is launched. But thank you so much for being with us, and we'll sort of definitely take the opportunity of having you and listening from you regarding the discussion and if a bit of the initial findings that Zainab has presented as well. So thank you so much, sir, for joining, and it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Uday. It's a nice presentation and a thought-provoking presentation. But my opinion is a little bit different. So with apologies, I would like to mention a few things. I'm not rejecting the total presentation, but the numbers Zainab quoted, I think these numbers are not correct. And my second observation is that Zainab has compared Angro with the Sahiwal. And in spite of considering Angro, if she would have considered Shanghai Electric Power Plant, Tharkol Block 1 power plant, then it makes the sense. And it would be an apple-to-apple comparison, because Shanghai Electric Power Plant is 1320 megawatt, 660 megawatt each plant, and Sahiwal is also 1320 megawatt. And the similar equipments are installed in both plants, in Sahiwal as well as in Tharkol Block 1 power generation company. The second very important thing, she has informed us that CO2 generation from Sahiwal is around half, even less than half of the Engro's generation. I don't think so. Actually, the number she had quoted, probably it is around rupees 12 and 30, the cost of CO2 emission. So it's more than double. The same amount of carbon is being burned in each plant. Only the capacity is changed. So how come that price would go double than that? So this is, I think it should be recalculated. Again, she has quoted the total overall external cost as the Sahiwal is 18 rupees, while Angro is 40 rupees per kilowatt hour. These are the external costs. I don't think these numbers are correct. If these are correct, then again, it may be reviewed or rechecked. Sahiwal coal is being imported from, starting from South Africa to the seaside and ocean, and all the way from Karachi to Sahiwal. So transportation emission and pollution is much higher. It covers around, I think most probably 2,500 kilometers or so before reaching the Sahiwal. But if she has not considered that cost, and again it is imported, the same quantity of CO2 is generated as Angro or Tharkol Block 1 will be generating. But again, the number she had calculated is much higher. One thing more, our planner, especially NTDC, has been given the mandate to plan the future generation of the country. Under IGSAP, they use the Plexus software. Obed, you are very well aware of that software as well. So that software considers all these costs, water, environment, and transmission lines. Every aspect is considered, and then it decides which plant is optimized and in which year. So we maintain the basket. We never ignore the renewable energy resources, and we prefer to utilize maximum renewable energy. But we have to maintain the system as well. For the system maintainability, we need reliable sources from renewable, from baseload power plants and nuclear power plants. So we have to build a basket. In that basket, definitely we need either a renewable coal or nuclear power plants, because we, if we consider for some time being that RFO plants were generating even more emissions, but now we have retired and we have stopped all the RFO power plants. So far, we are not generating any electricity through furnace oil power plants and diesel power plants. Regarding if I compare Port Qasim Keyes plant and Port Qasim electric power plant, Keyes 210 megawatt RFO plant was generating more pollution as compared to 1320 megawatt coal power plant. This is the physically and verifiably, if somebody has visited these plants 2-3 years back, then they must remember. Again, regarding environmental control, these plants, we have utilized electricity precipitators and FGDs. They are well maintained, and we are following IFC standards. What internationally being practiced, we are going in the same way. So saying that we are polluting the environment, and this is not correct, that Pakistan is only responsible for generating CO2. And if carbon tax is applicable, then it would be equally applicable for the transport sector as well, because maximum carbon is generated through the transport sector. So that must be considered. Regarding air pollution, we have gadgets over there in all plants, in Sahiwal, in Port Qasim, UPCO and Thar as well. Regarding water supply, I think Badr has pointed out that in Thar there is water scarce area. So no water supply, fresh water is not supplied over there. Neither government of Pakistan nor government of Sindh has provided fresh water to these plants. They are using underground water, and that is not a drinkable water. So they purify that, and a minor quantity of fresh water is being supplied to them. So they treat it and utilize that water over there. Regarding health issues, so far in Pakistan especially, no health issues has been reported. Again, coal power generation share in Pakistan's energy mix is around 13%. That's not a big share. Again, if we consider imported coal power plants, we are not operating these plants in full load. Since in last year, we think most probably, I don't have exact numbers, but we have saved almost $1 billion in the import of energy. So by using thermal power plants, imagine we have saved almost $1 billion. So at this stage, killing these plants is not justifiable. So these are my remarks. And if you need some other clarifications, I'm available. You can call me, and I'm available here to discuss further.
Thank you
to
so
finalize
much
this presentation.
sir, for these observations. And one thing which I can assure you is that until all of these assumptions are discussed bilaterally with you as well, we won't make the report public. So you can sort of count on us that after reconsidering the comments that you have just provided, and the assumptions that you have mentioned and the data you have informed us to sort of recheck, we'll definitely do that and have a bilateral discussion with you before making anything or going towards the finalization. So thank you so much for your interventions and very pertinent points as well. We'll definitely bring those into counts of all the modeling work that Zainab is also doing. So thank you so much for these interventions. So now before, going further, let's also, I believe 2 points that are eventually now further coming up is around the just energy transition lens, and I'll later then be requesting Umar, but I'll sort of be requesting both Zubair from Indus Consortium and Umar to be a bit precise, as we have to sort of go towards the concluding in like 6 to 7 to 8 minutes. But at the same time, and also sort of request Zainab, we have a couple of comments within the Q&A session, within the Q&A box. So also to sort of take into account, especially the point raised by Dr. Hassan, that is, you have already responded to it, that how a benchmark perhaps of having a developed country, how that needs to sort of be considered as well. But perhaps we can have more than one benchmarks going towards that end as well. But coming to Zubair, thank you so much. Indus Consortium sort of represents a very good coalition of the civil society that has been working on it, and particularly the one that does represent the just energy transition in its very true sense. So how do you see these technical and policy transition from coal to clean alternatives unfolding in this landscape under just energy transition framework, and how can these live realities be reflected in the national energy planning and pricing decisions as well? But perhaps, yeah, I'll just again request to that a lot of some points around this have been said, but yeah, if you have any points on this to be made, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. At Indus, we work with the grassroots communities, so they understand the national language Urdu. So I will be continuing or talking my points in Urdu. तो सबसे पहले ये है कि थैंक यू सो मच, आप लोग का बहुत शुक्रिया कि आपने मदऊ किया इंडस कंसोर्शियम को। और अगर हम कोल माइनिंग की बात करें तो ये एक एलसीए अगर हम देखें ना इनकी, तो एक अपर चेन है और फिर ऑपरेशन है और फिर उसकी जो डाउन स्ट्रीम है उसमें माइनिंग से लेकर ऑपरेशन और फिर उसकी जो डंपिंग है उसमें डिफरेंट टाइप्स के इमिशंस होती है। उसमें सिर्फ कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड की अगर बात जैसे कि जैनब ने की, काफ़ी ज़्यादा बहुत ज़बरदस्त जो कि मेंशन होनी चाहिए थी, जो कि सोशल कॉस्ट है उसका या एक्सटर्नल इंटरनलाइज करना चाहिए उस एक्सटर्नलिटीज़ को। उसमें हमारे पास सॉक्स है, नॉक्स है, पार्टिकुलेट पार्टिकुलेट मटेरियल्स हैं, और मेटर है, आर्सेनिक है, मरकरी है, लेड है, ये बहुत सारी इस तरह हैवी मेटल्स हैं जो कि हमारे एयर को, वहाँ के एयर को जहाँ से ये माइनिंग हो रही है या ऑपरेट हो रहे हैं, वहाँ के सॉइल को, वहाँ के वाटर को पोल्यूट करते हैं। और इसका इम्पैक्ट खासकर वहाँ की सोसाइटीज़ जो वहाँ रह रही है, वो कम्युनिटीज़ जो वहाँ रह रही है, वो इम्पैक्ट होती है। अब उसके साथ साथ क्या होता है कि वहाँ के, जो बदर साहब ने डिस्कस किया, एग्रीकल्चर, उसके लाइफ स्टॉक, वहाँ के जानवर, वहाँ के इंसान, वो सब इम्पैक्ट होते हैं। वहाँ की कल्चर इम्पैक्ट होता है। आप माइनिंग करते हैं और उस कॉस्ट को, इस तमाम कॉस्ट को ये मेंशन नहीं किया जाता हमारे पाकिस्तान के टैरिफ में, ये चीज़ रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं की जाती, हमारे प्लानिंग में ये चीज़ रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं की जाती। जबकि हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन पाकिस्तान आर्टिकल 9A आपको प्रॉमिस करता है एनवायरनमेंट, क्लीन एनवायरनमेंट एंड सेफ एनवायरनमेंट, और हमारा आर्टिकल 38D वो सोशल जस्टिस के ऊपर बात करता है, और वो हमारे प्लानिंग में, वो हमारे टैरिफ में नहीं होता। और जबकि ये लाजमी तौर पे फ़र्ज होना चाहिए कि वो होना चाहिए। दूसरी बात, जस्ट एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन की, जैसे कि हम यहाँ पे इस्लामाबाद में बिजली यहाँ देख रहे हैं, वो एट द कॉस्ट ऑफ व्हाट हम यहाँ पे देख रहे हैं, सस्ती बिजली, जैसे कि डीजी साहब ने बात की। लोकल कोल, हमारा लोकल कोर थर कोल वो लिग्नाइट है, और उसकी कार्बन इमिशंस ज़्यादा है ब्यूटेनस या सब ब्यूटेनस से, तो वो मोर कार्बन इंटेंसिव है, मोर पोल्यूटर है, मोर डर्टियर है। और पाकिस्तान का जो एनर्जी मिक्स है वो हेविली डिपेंडेंट कर रहा है कोल के ऊपर। 23% का कोल है, बहुत ज़्यादा। हमारे फाइनेंशियल डेट्स हैं वो तो कवर हो गए हैं बातें, लेकिन जो जस्ट एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन की बात है वो नहीं डिस्कस हुई अब तक, कि थर के लोग, साहेवाल के लोग, या जो भी जामशोरो है, या जो भी फॉसिल फ्यूल के पावर प्लांट्स है, उनके अराउंड जो कम्युनिटीज़ है, वो जो सोशली, इन्वायरमेंटली जो आपने उसको इम्पेक्ट किया, उनके हेल्थ के इशूज़, उनके जो गले ख़राब हुए हैं, उनके जो बीमारियां उस कोल की वजह से, माइनिंग की वजह से, पावर प्लांट जनरेशन, उनका, उसकी कॉस्ट पे आप सस्ती बिजली अगर बना रहे हैं, तो आई थिंक दिस इज़ नॉट गुड, एंड दिस ऑल शुड बी रिफ्लेक्टेड इन द टैरिफ। इवन सोशल कॉस्ट, वाटर की कॉस्ट, क्लाइमेट की कॉस्ट, वो सारी डिग्रेडेशन वो इंक्लूड होनी चाहिए। तो उसके लिए हमारे पास जो टैक्स का सिस्टम है वो लगाया जाए फॉसल फ्यूल के ऊपर, और रिन्यूएबल को, डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी सिस्टम को, उनको इंसेंटिवाइज किया जाए, उनके लिए फाइनेंशियल मैकेनिज्म बनाए जाए। और जो जो फॉसल फ्यूल से या कोल पावर प्लांट से जो लोग, वहाँ के जो कम्युनिटीज़ हैं, उनको, उनकी कैपेसिटी बिल्डअप की जाए, वो माइक्रो ग्रिड्स की तरफ उनको शिफ्ट किया जाए। तो इस चीज़ों के ऊपर काम बहुत ज़्यादा लाजमी है, होना चाहिए इसके ऊपर। थैंक यू।
Thank you so much, Zubair. Exactly, was Badr Saab wala one point to add here कि reflecting in tariff, but not again something to be tariff में reflect करें, any of the pricing signals, but something that should not eventually come down to the consumers at the end of the day. So that's something that's really important. So just in interest of time, before coming to Shakib Saab, I believe Umar has some points to make. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Ved. I think most of the points are already discussed by you. So I just only one comment for it. So for the economic merit order which we NTDC is developed, I just open it for the month of May. Let's discuss the case for the Cybel power plant. It is around 16.80. So according to Ali Nawaz Sahab, if we only include, not only include all the costs, but for the sake of argument, let's say it is 12.6 per kilowatt is the carbon damages cost, carbon emissions cost. What if we include this cost in the economic merit order, and this economic cost should be included in our merit order systems? So this cost will be 30 rupees per kilowatt hour. So what we can do this if we go for the modeling and research side. So this is my point. If we add the regulatory side and involve NEPRA to institutionalize the process of economic merit order systems, and also for the modeling side. So in that case, we can easily analyze the holistic review for our methodology. So people can easily understand. But as I've already explained that we did not include the cost of road damages, and also we did not include the actual cost which can be included, just like in health specific, like multiple factors they are including, like including water scarcity. So we didn't include this cost. So what we think that if we include all these costs, so this becomes more and more. So this is my point. I think
Thank you so much, Umar. And I believe just to sort of summarize the points, fully getting the how this needs to be again significantly incorporated. So yeah, just for summing up the discussion at mine, it has been again a wonderful discussion. We couldn't actually have sorry a lot of time for the Q&A, but Zainab has been responding to the questions in the chat and the Q&A box in writing, and we'll definitely again, just like I mentioned to Mali Nawaz Saab as well, and to all of the stakeholders, that we won't be definitely be putting it anything online till your suggestions, to the comments and suggestions you have sort of given on different assumptions that we have used, until they are all sort of addressed, keeping sort of a very just and community-centric development at the center, because that's eventually at the end of the day, we all have a same goal that we actually want to achieve, that is the economic as well as the social lift of the country. So that's we all of us here sitting here wants to sort of achieve that at the end of the day. How what path should be most politically correct given Pakistan's economic landscape, social landscape, how to make this transition most just is again something that we have to decide, and fully we all understand. I mean, SDP has been discussing on the carbon taxation with all of the stakeholders, including the IMF, including the Ministry of Finance, and we have been advocating for something that doesn't put any burden or a lot of burden to the consumer or even the industries. We have to definitely take economic sustainability as a very strong opponent as well. So we'll definitely make sure that all of these preliminary draft of findings are also forwarded to you. So if you have any comments, feel free to respond to us. But apologies for running late. But with this, let me come to Shakib Ilahi Saab for his final concluding and the vote of thanks. Shakib Saab, you have been listening to the discussion from Zainab's presentation till the end. If you have any key takeaways from the discussion and what potentially could be some of the steps going forward as well. So thank you so much for joining us. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and a very interesting, very insightful discussion. A lot of points, a lot of takeaways. Most important, I think, is that what Zainab has done is fantastic, because she's actually gone and been able to collect the data and to been able to do structure formulation and algorithms to try and analyze, and perhaps there is a need to sort of redo some of the numbers there and rethink it, but at least she set a goal in a direction which I think is very important, and it gives an analytical understanding of what needs to be done in the entire energy mix. With that said, a lot of further discussion is needed. I think it's very preliminary to make a comment on how things are, and I'm sure everybody who's been on the panel here today will give their input to you, Ubaid, and the entire team at STPI about how what they feel about it and what is amiss here, because you finalize and fine tune, and of course that is going to be something that that the government can take as a yardstick to evolve and develop it. With that said, I wish to thank and acknowledge everything that was done and spoken here today. Whatever Quratul and Jameel had to speak about, and the sensitivity of the issue, and Ayub Saab, with his analysis, and then of course what we heard from Badr Alam Saab, and his comparison about what happens globally, and how best we can make an equitable understanding of the issue, and of course Helen from Bangladesh. I mean, we need to learn from you, and if like you said, we both need to learn from each other on a continuous basis, which I think is our goal. Thank you very much, everybody, and it was a pleasure listening to you all and learning from you all today. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, TSTP.
Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thank you.